This is the Film Symbologist, back with another video. This is the 26th episode of the Prometheus analysis series. If you haven't seen previous installments, I suggest checking them out. In this video, I will continue to flesh out the components of the source myth discussed in episode 24 by taking a look at another story that is being played out in the dome structures on LV-223. By the end of this video, you should better understand a key part of the film's story and how it relates to the larger narrative being told in Ridley Scott's 2012 science fiction film. In episode 17, I described the pyramids on LV-223 as stages where the events of the film are acted out by the characters and observed in the valley of the theater by other members of the crew and the audience. Episode 25 discussed the pyramid scan and how it references one of the stories being told in Prometheus. In addition to being a stage, the dome structure itself also offers another clue about one of the other stories being told. The same reference is made in the background of Peter Wayland's recorded presentation to the crew, and in the bonus feature TED Talk. In the hologram, the Titan of Industry is on Mars with large dome structures in the background, and his TED Talk is given in an enormous arena filled with people. These domes, the arena, and the pyramidal structures on LV-223 are references to John Milton's Paradise Lost from 1667. Milton's epic poem, which is considered the greatest work of English literature, was discussed in episode 11 from a romantic and Gnostic perspective that was sympathetic to the character of Satan, his fallen angels, and their rebellion against who they saw as a tyrannical and unjust God. This video will instead explore the connection between Paradise Lost and Prometheus through Milton's intended interpretation of his poem. Milton begins his epic by calling upon a spirit to aid him with his creative retelling and expansion of the biblical narrative. In the ancient world, it was common for poets and artists to call upon various muses to aid in the production of great works. Rather than call upon a pagan muse from antiquity, Milton decided to seek the assistance of the spirit that was supposedly present with God in the biblical account of creation. Milton aimed for Paradise Lost to reveal profound truths and to surpass previous works of epic poetry, including Homer's Iliad and Dante's Divine Comedy. Many people believe he succeeded in his goal. Milton opens his poem with the following verse: "Of man's first disobedience in the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woe, with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd, who first taught the chosen seed, in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. Or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Ionian mount, while it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest, thou from the first wast present, and with mighty wings outspread dove-like sattest brooding on the vast abyss, and madest it pregnant. What in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men." The rest of Paradise Lost retells stories from the Bible, from creation to Adam and Eve's expulsion from the garden, but with an expanded focus on the war in heaven between Satan and his rebel angels and God and his loyal emissaries. In Milton's epic poem, War is waged against God for a variety of reasons, including Satan's pride, dislike of humanity, and dissatisfaction with his intended role and position in creation, which included being responsible for looking after mankind. After losing the war, Satan and his followers are cast from heaven and banished to hell. They initially wallow in misery, but eventually Satan rallies his fallen angels to seek vengeance against God. To accomplish this, Satan plans to travel to Earth to corrupt mankind and get them expelled from Eden as a way to punish God. Eve gives in to Satan's temptation to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Adam willingly accepts the forbidden fruit from Eve. Upon Satan's return to hell, he shares the news of his apparent success, at which point the rebel angels undergo a grotesque transformation. As punishment for their corruption of humanity, they are turned into serpents. Although the first man and woman were exiled from the garden, Adam was given a preview of the many struggles that his descendants would endure, including subsequent visits by the rebellious sons of God, who mated with daughters of man to create the Nephilim, or heroes of old. But hope remains for mankind's eventual redemption. Satan and his rebellious followers, on the other hand, seem condemned to suffer in hell for eternity. For Prometheus, Ridley Scott drew inspiration and story elements from Milton's 17th century poem. The LV-223 engineers, Wayland and David, all share similarities with Milton's Satan. The so-called engineers on LV-223 can be seen as fallen angels or rebellious sons of God. It can be reasoned that they resented the rules imposed upon them by God and despised their position in the cosmic hierarchy as caretakers of mankind, and so they rebelled and were cast out of paradise and sent to LV-223. On the moon, these fallen engineers built domed structures and plotted their revenge. The engineers' plan to bring the black goo to Earth can be seen as an attempt to corrupt mankind and create weapons to fight against their rival faction of angels. In this way, the LV-223 engineers' use of the goo would be like the sons of God from Genesis or the Watchers from the Book of Enoch, who mate with the daughters of man to create Nephilim, or in the film's case, the deacons. In Scott's movie, these engineers are stopped before they can carry out their mission to tempt mankind with the black goo. Episode 20 explains how the LV-223 engineers may have been prevented from executing their plan. Whereas in Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan was punished after his temptation of mankind, in Scott's Prometheus, it appears that the LV-223 engineers were punished prior to being able to corrupt mankind with the black goo. After being annihilated, the LV-223 engineers' suits appear empty, like their bodies have decomposed into the soil, and given life to the primitive worms in the ground of the pyramidal structure, like the fallen angels who were transformed into serpents. In Paradise Lost, Milton describes a structure created from metals smelted from molten lava located at the center of hell that serves as its capital. Having been built from the ground up in a matter of hours and having an almost heavenly beauty, this vast structure is called Pandemonium, and it's where Satan presides over the infernal council and delivers rousing speeches to his fellow rebels. The interiors of the Juggernaut and the chambers of the pyramid evoke imagery from Milton's descriptions of hell's capital. The similarities of the arena hosting the TED Talk, Peter Wayland, and the audience listening and cheering him on, to Pandemonium, Satan, and the fallen angels are apparent. Wayland's opposition to restrictive laws that limit his android experiments further illustrates the parallels.
We can create cybernetic individuals who, in just a few short years, will be completely indistinguishable from us. The question, of course, before us is what the hell are we supposed to do with this power? Or more importantly, one should ask, what are we allowed to do with this power? Rules, restrictions, laws, ethical guidelines, all but forbidding us from moving forward.
That Wayland seems to exile himself to the barren deserts of Mars, where he erects giant domed structures, solidifies the connection to Satan. Wayland seeks to become a rebellious god, even going so far as to corrupt creation by conjuring an artificial sun, part man, part machine, for himself. In Wayland's presentation to the crew, he describes some of the gifts he has bestowed upon David, but claims that the android is incapable of appreciating these gifts.
There's a man sitting with you today. His name is David. Unfortunately, he's not human, and he will never die. And yet he is unable to appreciate these remarkable gifts, for that would require the one thing that David will never have: a soul.
Ironically, man supposedly has a soul, and presumably the capacity to appreciate gifts, yet we rarely express gratitude for the life, breath, and abilities we've been given. Instead, we act unaware, unappreciative, and entitled to gifts. In fact, Wayland travels light years from Earth to demand things from who he thinks is his creator. And in a way, the engineer was planning to bring a form of enlightenment to Earth. Rather than being grateful, however, Wayland is demanding. So perhaps being banished to hell to suffer and die was a just punishment for the man. David, on the other hand, is a product of Wayland's Luciferian intellect. Born a golem, the android still seeks to become a demigod, or even a creator god himself. His rebellious nature is previewed in Prometheus, with his hatred of his father, his role as caretaker for inferior humans, and his experimentations on members of the crew. David's decapitation is also a fitting punishment for a couple of reasons. First, it makes him dependent upon Shaw, a human, as his caretaker. Second, Wayland sees himself as a god and makes David in his image. The LV-223 engineers, meanwhile, see mankind as weak, ignorant, and in need of enlightenment, and therefore should not be making creatures like David in their own inferior image. And so, in a reversal of the biblical story, David is slain through a head attack by the engineer Goliath. In Covenant, David's creative ambitions are on full display as he experiments on the mortals around him to create xenomorphs, another version of Nephilim. The android seems to love his creations, just as the LV-223 engineers seem to revere the Deacon, perhaps for these creatures' ruthless behavior towards humanity. While David reigns supreme in a hell of his own making on Planet 4, he does so in miserable solitude until humans again come to his rescue. Shaw, who came to David's rescue in Prometheus, acts as the Eve character in the story. She is warned not to eat the forbidden fruit on LV-223, but she misinterprets the so-called star maps as invitations. Despite the best efforts of the engineer in the opening scene to prevent the inhabitants of LV-223 from corrupting Eve, Satan's temptation still makes its way to Earth through Shaw's mind. In Scott's film, like in Milton's poem, Satan's actions aren't the cause of Adam and Eve's expulsion from the garden. As with Holloway and Shaw, it was a result of their choices that Earth was left behind and their place in paradise was lost. And it was through Yannick's action that paradise was preserved a little while longer for the people remaining on Earth. And while Shaw does eventually take and eat of the forbidden fruit, she does so cautiously. Perhaps because she is a believer, the scientist is hesitant to remove her helmet, and she tells David not to open the door to the ampule room and not to touch the urns. Even so, in the end, Shaw is relentless in her pursuit of knowledge, Just as Wayland pursued immortality, the LV-223 engineers sought freedom from humanity, and Satan and his fallen angels wanted equal footing with God. Unable to restrain their Luciferian intellects, satanic rebellions, and Gnostic desires, each was punished. The fallen angels are cast from heaven to hell. Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden to the wilderness. The engineers are kicked out of paradise and condemned to LV-223. Wayland flees Earth for Mars. The Prometheus expedition leaves their homeworld for the Zeta Reticuli system. And in the end, Shaw leaves the alien moon for the unknown. In each case, the comfort of one's existing knowledge is abandoned in the hopes of gaining a new insight. This choice, as it always does, comes with consequences, the loss of something. But why should something have to be sacrificed in order to gain something of value? Who established this rule? Why should we follow it? Why not set up our own system based on accumulation without loss? Why not strive for power over the cosmic order, over creation, and over life and death? This was the reasoning that fueled Lucifer's rebellion in heaven, Satan's corruption of mankind, Eve's taking of the forbidden fruit, Wayland's quest for immortality, David's desire to create life, and the engineer's plan for the black goo. Understood through Milton's Paradise Lost, it seems that plan was to turn men into monstrous golems like Fifield and Holloway, and use the daughters of man like Shaw to create Nephilim in the form of deacons. Not only would these powerful beings represent a corruption of mankind, but they may also be able to fight the rival faction of the LV-223 engineers. That may be the rebel engineers' plan for man, but man was not made in the image of the beings on LV-223. Mankind's true creator has a different plan for his creation, one that is more aligned with the faction of engineers represented in the opening scene of the film and depicted in the ancient artifacts. The engineer's act at the waterfall can be interpreted as his attempt to prevent the LV-223 engineer's plan from happening, so that mankind's true purpose is not interfered with. But perhaps humanity's capacity for disobedience is deeply ingrained within us, as evidenced by Shaw and Holloway's misunderstanding of the so-called star maps. Can we just remain in the garden, content with our blissful ignorance? Or are we compelled to want something more? Can we attain it without first falling? Or is disobedience a necessary step, even if few ever escape from the punishment that follows? Milton's masterpiece offers insight into these questions and presents a pathway for redemption and restoration of paradise for those who have fallen. This will be the subject of a future video in the series. For now, I think it can be argued that throughout the process of writing Paradise Lost, Milton was indeed animated by the spirit he called upon for assistance. Perhaps this same spirit guided Ridley Scott during the making of Prometheus, his adventurous film that with no middle flight intends to soar above its predecessors and pursue things previously unattempted in cinema. And back in the summer of 2012, I am convinced that those dark theaters were illumined with a profound story several millennia in the making. In the next video, I will continue to flesh out the source myth by taking a closer look at the warning depicted in the ancient artifacts. If you enjoy content like this, like the video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. For early access to new videos, consider becoming a member of the YouTube channel or Patreon. Information about how to join is in the video description. This is the Film Symbologist. Thanks for watching.